It's a strange thing, isn't it? A single story about a shark attack can make you think twice about swimming in the ocean. But you probably don't hesitate to get in a car, even though that's statistically way, way more dangerous. It's this fascinating puzzle. Why is our sense of risk so often completely wrong? Well, we're going to unpack exactly that, the mental shortcuts our brains are using that make us fear the wrong things. Okay, so let's just dive right in and look at how distorted our internal map of danger really is. We all carry this map around in our heads, right? A sort of ranking of what's risky and what's safe. But as you're about to see, that map, it often doesn't match the real world at all. So to kick things off, a quick question for you. Just take a look. Which one do you think kills more people every year? Strokes, or all types of accidents combined, car crashes, falls, you name it. Don't overthink it, just go with your gut. So if you guessed accidents, you are in good company. About 80% of people in a huge study thought the same thing. But the reality? Strokes kill almost twice as many people. And it just gets crazier from there. Look at this. Asthma is 20 times more deadly than tornadoes. And disease, in general, kills 18 times more people than accidents. And yet, for most of us, that's just not how it feels. It's clear our perception is consistently dramatically off. The big question is, why? Well, the first big clue to solving this puzzle is a powerful mental shortcut our brain uses all the time. It's one of the main culprits for why our internal riskometer is so badly calibrated. It's called the availability heuristic. The idea behind it is actually pretty simple. If we can think of an example of something happening and that example comes to mind really quickly and vividly, our brain just assumes it must be a common thing. On the flip side, if we struggle to recall an example, we figure it must be rare. It's a mental rule of thumb that, often works, but sometimes it gets things spectacularly wrong. And this right here gets to the heart of why it goes wrong. The version of the world we see in the media is not a perfect mirror of reality, not even close. The news is naturally biased toward things that are dramatic, new, and emotionally charged. A shark attack, a plane crash, a tornado. Those stories stick in our heads. So when our brain needs to figure out how common something is, it doesn't want to dig through boring statistics. That's hard. Instead, it swaps that difficult question for a much easier one. How easily can I remember a story about this? And because of that media bias, the dramatic but rare events are what pop into our heads first. And we see this play out in the real world constantly. Take this example. Right after a big earthquake hits California, that event is fresh, it's vivid, it's easily available in everyone's memory. And what happens? People rush out to buy earthquake insurance, they secure their homes, but as the months and years go by, that vivid memory starts to fade. And as the availability of that disaster dims, so does the worry, and so does the motivation to stay prepared. But it's not just about how easily we can recall something. Oh no. There's another, maybe even more powerful force at work: pure, raw emotion. And that brings us to our second key concept, the affect heuristic. The affect heuristic is another one of these mental substitutions. When we're faced with a really complicated question like, what do I think about this new technology? Or what's my position on this policy? Our brain often just answers a much, much simpler question instead. How do I feel about it? Our gut feelings, do I like this or dislike it? Does it feel good or bad? End up steering our beliefs about the actual risks and benefits. The psychologist Jonathan Haidt just nailed this idea with this quote. It's perfect. The emotional tail wags the rational dog. Our feelings, that's the emotional tail, they often decide which way we're going to go on an issue, and then our rational mind, the dog, just scurries around trying to find justifications for the decision we already made with our gut. And researchers have shown this in a really clever experiment. Okay, so first they ask people to rate the risks and benefits of some technology. Then they give those same people a message that only talks about how great the benefits are. Now, what do you think happened? Well, of course, people's opinion of the benefits went up. But here's the wild part. Their perception of the risks went down. Even though they were given zero new information about the risks, the takeaway is just amazing. Simply making people feel better about the benefits made them believe the risks were lower. So we've got these two powerful biases, availability and affect, working away inside our own heads. But what happens when they get out into the wild and start interacting with millions of other people's biases? Well, that's when you can get a phenomenon called an availability cascade. That's how a fear can literally go viral. An availability cascade is pretty much what it sounds like, a social feedback loop. It's this self-reinforcing chain reaction that can start with a pretty small story about a minor risk, but then gets amplified by the media and public concern until it snowballs into a massive social and political crisis. So let's break down how this feedback loop works. Step 1, a media story about some risk pops up, and it triggers our availability and affect heuristics. People get worried. Step 2, that public worry itself becomes a news story, which of course generates even more media coverage. Step 3, news outlets start competing for the most dramatic, attention-grabbing headlines, which makes the danger seem even bigger. And finally, step 4, the issue is now on everyone's radar, and politicians feel this immense pressure to step in and take big, decisive action. A textbook, absolute classic example of this was the Alar scare back in 1989. Alar was a chemical they used on apples. A press report came out suggesting that at really, really high doses, it caused cancer in lab animals. And that one story, well, it lit the fuse. Public fear just exploded, all fueled by nonstop, intense media coverage. The pressure got so big that the company pulled the chemical off the market and the FDA banned it. The final verdict, years later? It was a massive, massive overreaction to what was a pretty minor problem. And the real irony is that by scaring everyone away from eating perfectly healthy apples, the panic probably did more harm to public health than the chemical ever would have. So this all leads us to a really deep, really difficult question for any democracy. If the public's perception of risk can be so easily twisted by these mental shortcuts, who should actually be in charge of making policy? I mean, what do you do when widespread public panic runs headfirst into the calm, statistical analysis of experts? Who gets to decide? This is a fundamental tension, and there is no easy answer. And you can see this debate perfectly in the work of two leading thinkers. On one side, you have the legal scholar Cass Sunstein. He basically argues we should trust impartial experts. For him, risk is an objective thing you can measure, and policy needs to be protected from the irrational fears of the public so we don't waste resources on overreactions. But on the other side, you have the psychologist Paul Slovic. He argues that risk is inherently subjective. He says the public's idea of risk is richer and more complex than just numbers, and that in a democracy, policy has to reflect the values and concerns of the people. And Slovic makes this incredibly powerful point with this quote. He argues that the very act of choosing how to measure risk, is it lives lost? Is it money? Is it years of life lost? That choice itself is a subjective decision that reflects certain values. And in his view, whoever gets to define risk is the one holding all the power. So where does all this leave us? Well, the reality is that democracy is messy. Both sides have a point, right? These availability cascades can lead to totally irrational and wasteful policies. But at the same time, you can't just ignore widespread public fear. Fear itself is a real harm, rational or not. The best path forward seems to be a combination of the two, making policy that's informed by the best expert knowledge we have, but that also respects and addresses the emotions and values of the public. So I'll leave you with a final thought. Now that you know about these powerful shortcuts your brain is taking, the availability heuristic, the affect heuristic, and the crazy cascades they can create, the next time you see a scary headline that catches your eye, just pause for a second. Ask yourself, is my fear here based on the statistical reality? Or is it being cranked up to 11 by a story that's just really vivid, emotional, and easy to remember? Which risks in your own life might be worth a second look?